We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and your magic is weak. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's comic book month, and this week we are talking the 2022 film Black Adam. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host in an adult body, Andrew Williams. All right. You ready for this one, Andrew?
I mean, I think it's an adult body. It certainly feels like it. Yes, beyond ready to dive back into comic books for a whole month. Back to the dance. No.
Back to our roots, Andrew. Back to our foundation, where it all started.
The foundations, the thing that brought us to the table. I can't think of any other phrases right now. But yeah, and jumping back into some of those that came out kind of after the show started. I think that'll be a fun thing to do as well. So I am excited to dive into the long gestating Black Adam.
Yeah, this movie was probably like in pre-production since before our podcast ever started. The road to get here was so long for a Black Adam movie of all things. But yeah, this podcast used to exclusively be about comic book movies for over a year after we started. Every single week, we're talking about a poorly received movie based on a comic book before we started mixing that up. But now, as you said, Andrew, this month we are going back to it. And for a lot of the episodes this month, we will be doing, like we're doing today, talking about movies that released after we started changing our format. It wasn't possible for us to cover Black Adam during the first year because the movie wasn't out yet. But now it is, and had an interesting release, interesting reception, and people were asking us about it. So we're getting around to this one, getting around to a few others that have released rather recently this month. But Andrew, let's just go ahead and get into it. Black Adam, what is your history with this movie? I do believe you saw this in theaters, correct?
I did. Absolutely saw it in theaters. Was there pretty much opening night. This came at a weird time, obviously, for the DCEU. Obviously, the DC film slate has been, as evidenced by the presence of several on this podcast. You can imagine that the DCEU has had some struggles pretty much since its inception. And so there was a lot of talk that Black Adam was kind of the next phase, or as it were, not even necessarily the next thing, but was going to kind of set the tone for what was to come. And I was deeply interested in how that was going to look and how that was going to feel. And just again, after hearing about this movie for genuinely what feels like 15 years, I feel like the late aughts was when you started hearing the rumblings of The Rock wanting to play Black Adam, or The Rock attached to a Captain Marvel movie or something like that. Going back and forth, and to see it finally get to the finish line, I had to see that. And obviously being familiar with the character, that was another piece of it too, is, one of the first comics that I read when I first started reading comics was Jeff Johns' JSA, which features Black Adam and is arguably the entire inspiration for this entire portrayal of the character. A lot of the story that they're telling here originates in those comics. So had a lot of interest going into this, seeing how The Rock was going to bring this to life. So, yeah.
I did not see this one in theaters. I mean, the DC universe had kind of, it just fallen apart. But I don't know how else to say it. Like, there was no through line, no overarching story. Casting was up in the air at this point. A relaunch seemed imminent. And so that wasn't hooking me. Over in the MCU, if there's a movie coming out that I don't personally seem as interested in, I still might check it out anyway because I'm invested in that universe. It's kind of what they're banking on over there. And they deliver pretty consistently. But over in the DC universe, that just hasn't been the case. On top of that, I can't say I'm a Black Adam fan. That's a character I'm aware of from various books. I know him from the Injustice games, but that's not hooking me in. A little bit of Rock fatigue, I think, factored into a lot of people, and I probably count myself among them. But if there was anything from those trailers that did have me interested, though, it was the Justice Society showing up. Hawkman on the big screen, that's something that I didn't think I would ever see. The Atom, or Atom Smasher, you can clarify that for me a little bit later in this episode. Yep. But seeing characters like that, more minor characters get prominent roles, even if I didn't quite understand how they were fitting into a Black Adam movie, that did kind of catch my interest. But I didn't venture to the theaters to see it. Its reception was lackluster, didn't make a lot of money, so I wasn't anxious to see it. But when we had this opportunity for our podcast to cover it, I figured that was as good an excuse as any to finally watch it, which I did this week. And let me just say up front, I really enjoyed this movie. I had a good time. I do think I kind of had the benefit of watching it in retrospect after I don't know if hype's the right word, but when this movie is coming out, it was touted almost as like a soft relaunch of the universe. The hierarchy was changing, something that The Rock said ad nauseum, and it seemed to have major implications moving forward. Because of this movie underperforming, those implications never came to be. So I can watch it now kind of without the weight of all of that and kind of enjoy it for what it is. I think it benefited a lot, and I had a good time and got a lot of positives that we can talk about. Before we get into all the scenes and characters and casting, though, let's set the stage a little bit. The movie was released, finally, October 21st of 2022. On October release. It's like a prestige release. This is like a summer movie releasing in October, which is kind of strange. The movie is made on a very large budget, which is impossible to nail down these days. I'm going to say it was a $200 million budget. You've got some articles that really want to emphasize the failure and financial bombing of this movie that are going to give you a higher budget. You have some articles that are doing the reverse that might say it's a $190 million budget. But I think it was at least a $200 million production budget plus marketing. And at the box office, it only brings in worldwide $393.3 million. Not financial success, maybe making its production back, but not enough to justify moving forward with the vision that this was trying to set for the DC universe. And critically, as you said, Andrew, it's not well received. It holds just a 38% on Rotten Tomatoes. Gotta point out, though, this does have a pretty big split between critics and audiences. The audience score is 88%. That is almost like Venom levels of critics versus audiences, which is one of the biggest splits I've seen. So audiences were enjoying it. Word of mouth wasn't too bad. I do know some people. My mom really likes this movie. Andrew, you always talk about movies your mom likes. My mom was like, you see Black Adam?
I'm sure my mom likes this one too. So
my mom doesn't see a lot of superhero movies or kind of movies in theaters in general. I think she'll go if going with her kids or my stepdad or whatever. But she's like, yeah, I really liked it. She's like, it has, I like a good story. It's not all about special effects. It had a really good story in there. I was like, all right, Mom. And now that I've seen it, I can see why my mom liked it.
I actually didn't realize the gulf was that much. I knew that it didn't do well critically. But even one of the friends I saw it with, like, I kind of came out, was kind of feeling very middle of the road. I was kind of like, all right, it is what it is. Because I kind of was. There was weird rumors at the time, as there always are, and they're probably all nonsense, about what the plan was, if this movie made, $800 million bucks or $1 billion, well, whatever. There was all these talks about like what The Rock's DCEU was going to be, and obviously that did mean some kind of new Superman film. And this is something that plays into what happened with the ending of The Flash. The ending of The Flash changing around so many times when Cavill was being brought back. There was talk about working him into the end of the Flash. To clarify, I'm not going to spoil the end of the Flash. I'll just tell you Cavill's not in it. But there was a talk that he would be if he was going to come back for this. That was going to modify the ending of it. Possibly the plans they had for the DCU that at the time were moving forward would be impacted by this. I'd heard things that Black Adam was kind of be similar to like the Thanos of this phase of the DCEU, kind of be the kind of thing in the background, which seemed odd given how the movie portrays Black Adam. But it was definitely there was definitely a lot of stuff flying around, and then the movie comes out, doesn't do well critically. The money's just not there, which is ultimately the biggest thing. If this movie had still made $700 or $800 million, we'd probably be looking at The Rock's DC universe right now. Who knows how that looks? But there is a big gulf there. I didn't realize the audience score was so much higher, and it's off of 5,000 plus reviews, so it's not like it's some small sample size. Now there are movies on here that have 250,000 plus, but it's still a high group of people that are all seemingly really liking what this movie is doing. And probably a little sad that it's the promises and things that it hints at won't be coming.
Let's take a look at the creative team behind the movie. It is written by Adam Steichel, Rory Haynes, and Sohrab Nashirvani. Let's break this down a little bit. We have I'm just going to say first names because I had a hard enough time getting through his last names just now. But Adam is the first credited writer. And you start looking through the filmography, and it's you're kind of looking for why they were tapped for Black Adam. You see movies like Maid of Honor, the rom-com movie, Due Date, the comedy, and then you get to Rampage. And it starts to make sense given that Dwayne Johnson is a producer and has some creative force behind this movie. He previously worked with Dwayne Johnson. And then you look at the writing team of Rory and Sohrab, and they technically only have one other writing credit, which was The Mauritanian. And that's it for their brought on here. So if I had to guess, Andrew, I would say the writing duo took a first pass until Rock gets involved and brings his guy in for a punch-up.
It's possible. Rory and Sohrab also created a TV show called The Informer over on the BBC. It's a 6-part television drama, kind of a political espionage thing. And then obviously The Mauritanian is based off of a semi true story. They had both of those. It looks like they've done a lot of script work. It looks like they've sold a lot of scripts. It looks like they've done a few things that just haven't quite gotten to production yet. Just kind of sounds like they've sold about 8 scripts and they've only had kind of 2 get to the finish line. And it is... I'm curious how they came about it, but I think it's a fair assumption they probably wrote the original script. And then our other writer was brought in to kind of punch that up. They also had a script that was on the blacklist almost 10 years ago now. Never made it to film. It's interesting because the blacklist, for those of you who don't know, is basically the best scripts that haven't been turned into movies. It's a list they do every year. And it is
so not the James Spader television show.
No, and
that's not what
it's actually it's interesting because it's usually a list of, it can be a list of as many as like 200 to 300 scripts. It can be as few as 75. These days it tends to be a little bit closer to that, more like 70 to 75. But there are some years where they've made a great many of them into films. Some of the stuff that's been on the blacklist in the past are stuff like Little Miss Sunshine. Fanboys was there. As you get more recently, stuff like Air, the more recent drama starring Ben Affleck about the creation of the Air Jordan, was there. The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. They cloned Tyrone. Both of those came out recently. Knock at the Cabin. Like, it'd be shocking. Now, these days, you're only getting about 10 to 15 that usually get produced, but also were pretty recently from some of these. But it is a fun thing to look at, to kind of see what does and doesn't get produced, and the things that did start as things on the blacklist, including some surprising ones. But so they've obviously been around for a while. That's what kind of makes me think they did the original script for this. It was probably something they wrote during the many, many years of production.
The movie is directed by Jaume Collet Serra. Now, again, you're digging through their filmography. You see movies like House of Wax, The Shallows, and then boom, Jungle Cruise, starring Dwayne Johnson. So again, I'm getting the feeling that Mr. Johnson kind of gathered people that he enjoyed working with, that thought their vision would match with Black Adam, and brought them on board here. Because otherwise, I don't see a lot in that filmography that really translates to high-budget superhero movie. But again, just the relationship with Dwayne Johnson, I think, really informs the decision here.
Yeah, I actually like looking. He has 3 Liam Neeson action thrillers in a row, and then does a 4th as well. So of the endless barrage of Liam Neeson is a man with a particular set of skills in an unfortunate situation. This guy has 4 entries: Unknown, Nonstop, Run All Night, and The Commuter. And then
hey, it's good work if you can get it, Andrew.
Hey, I would gladly take that job. Also directs The Shallows, which I think has, I don't know if I've described this to you, but has the most unintentionally hilarious transition in a film for me ever.
Okay, well, you have not, but I've got to hear this.
So, The Shallows is a classic. It's a survival kind of. It's horror, but not really. But basically,
the shark attack.
Blake
movie,
Lively,
right?
Shark attack. She's stuck on like a buoy. I forget exactly what it is. But she's like 200 yards from the shore, like so she can see the land. She can't get there because there's sharks. And she's on this rock, I think, not a buoy. But she obviously, no spoilers, survives. But
that sounds like a spoiler, Andrew.
Sorry, spoilers for a 7-year-old movie.
They don't always survive. Have you seen Open Water? They don't survive. Spoilers.
Well, spoiler. Anyway, she survives, and there's this cutaway to dark, and then it fades back up to the most picturesque beach you could imagine. Like white sand, blue water, the most beautiful beach you have ever seen in your life. And then Galveston, Texas comes up in the lower left corner.
All right,
and
now I understand why it is so funny.
Everyone in the theater, because I saw this when I still lived in Houston, started laughing. Everybody started laughing because anybody in Texas knows Galveston don't look like that.
With the beautiful puke green water, Andrew. I don't know what you're talking about. It's picturesque.
It's the medical needles in the sand that really makes it. Yeah, it was. I think I saw it with Doug. I still remember everybody in the theater laughing at that, though. I was like, that's wonderful. No one fell for it for a second.
Wow, that's good.
But anyway, like you said, this seems like The Rock kind of has his guys. If you start looking through The Rock's filmography, you can see that there are a lot of recurring directors, writers, and it very much feels like The Rock kind of has the people that the more cynical may say the people that just kind of do what The Rock wants them to do, because The Rock's mostly kind of the driving force of a lot of the movies that he makes. But also it could just be like, and just a solid working relationship either way. The Rock knows what they're capable of. He knows it's going to line up with him and what he wants to accomplish. So he's hardly the first person to ever have recurring collaborators, recurring creators, and this movie seems to be no exception.
Well, Andrew, I think it's time. I think we jump into this movie, all the positives, everything that we like about the film Black Adam. You ready?
I am.
After gaining the powers of Shazam, Teth Adam is locked away by the Council of Wizards for his inability to control his rage. thousands of years later, he is reawakened in a desperate attempt to free the country of Kondak from foreign military occupation. In response to his arrival, Amanda Waller sends the Justice Society, consisting of the superheroes Dr. Fate, Hawkman, Cyclone, and Atom Smasher, to stop Black Adam and his rampage. But when the demon Sabak arises in Kondak, the Justice Society must team up with Black Adam to stand a chance against the new threat. Enemy of my enemy's a friend kind of thing here. Uneasy alliances in the final act of this movie, Andrew. But, we talked a little bit about it before we hit record here, but it's a pretty simple premise, I think, and then it really ramps up at the end where suddenly we're saving the world at the end of this movie. But before then, it keeps it relatively small scale. Relatively.
It does. We have it's pretty isolated to the struggles in Kondak with Intergang, which is a classic DC Comics kind of villainous organization. They featured Superman the Animated Series for anybody that may be familiar. But just a hired group of thugs, mercenaries. So Kondak is in this almost consistent state of political turmoil. And there is a resistance force trying to fight back. And a lot of the movie focuses on that conflict with this kind of bubbling thing in the background that ultimately does explode in the third act, where we kind of, that's like you said, that's where our big monstrous villain and our big end of the world kind of apocalyptic scenario do kind of take over. But by and large, this is a fairly small scale story for such a powerful character, and it is interesting to see that story kind of told in this way, because a lot of that, the idea of Black Adam being the potential ruler of Kondak and things like that, that's stuff from the page. So it's pretty cool to see.
Pretty cool indeed, Andrew. Before we jump into all these scenes, though, let's talk about this cast. Starting with the best casting, best performance of the film, because every episode, we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. And we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off here. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Black Adam?
I have to go with alum of the show, Pierce Brosnan, as Kent Nelson / Dr. Fate. Obviously, Pierce Brosnan is a fantastic actor, and he's definitely somebody you call in when you need a little bit of... Chris, what is that?
Gravitas.
Smooth. Very nice. I like that. Yeah. So Pierce Brosnan brought in to kind of be the aged kind of elder statesman of the Justice Society, who's been doing this a long time. He says as much throughout one point in this movie, that he's kind of been alive far longer than he ever expected. And he, as a side effect, they kind of give him this ability to see multiple futures. Like he sees like Dr. Fate, so he kind of sees the future, or possible futures. And that's something that kind of haunts him throughout the course of the film. But I also like, obviously, just seeing that character on the big screen with the big screen treatment is just cool. Obviously, I've been reading about this character in various forms since I was a kid. To see him brought to the screen in a pretty comic accurate way. You look at pictures of Dr. Fate, especially in the last 20 years or so, it's pretty accurate. The helmet is especially the kind of big, notable kind of design thing for him. And I just think that looks really, really cool. I like the way they play his powers. I like the way that Pierce Brosnan plays this character. Definitely somebody who's seen his fair share of conflicts, and knows which ones are worth getting involved in and which ones aren't worth getting involved in. There's one where Hawkman and Black Adam fly out the window and he's like, I'm going to sit this one out. And I get it. I absolutely get it. So, but I love what he's doing here. I love his portrayal of the character. It just love seeing this character brought to the big screen. in the blue and the gold and everything. The way they do his powers with the kind of light prisons that he makes, the multiple versions of himself that he creates, everything. I just think it's very, very cool. And he's elevating the whole movie, adding that little bit more holistic view. He's one of the characters that seems to sort of be aware of this much greater danger waiting at the end of the path. He's just not entirely sure where it's coming from. Obviously, they imprison Black Adam at one point, and he realizes that's not it. That's not the thing that stops this. And so it's very, very cool. I love the look. I love the performance. And so, yeah, got to give it to our boy, Pierce Brosnan, as Kent Nelson / Dr. Fate.
I think up and down, this movie is very well cast, especially all of these heroes. We've already said these are heroes that we thought we may never see on the big screen. It's so cool to see them all brought to life and in such great fashion with such great casting. But I've just got to agree with you. Pierce Brosnan is also getting my Mark Strong Award for what he is bringing to this movie. Some much needed gravitas, as we've said, some much needed, seriousness isn't the right word, but sort of prestige and level-headedness. Black Adam is all about rage and flying off the handle, and their sort of characterization of Hawkeye here is very similar, and they're always at odds and kind of having macho contests with each other, I guess. And so you really need Dr. Fate on the team. You really need someone who can kind of rise above that and see things a little bit more clearly. So I think his role is just so important for the balance of the team and the movie. Great look. That helmet is so rad. It's so cool. Just the solid gold, no eye holes or nothing. Looks awesome. Pierce Brosnan looks awesome. The man is aging like the finest of wines. So cool to see him in this role. In fact, a friend of the show, my wife, she watched most of this movie with me, and Pierce Brosnan walks on, and almost immediately she's like, dude, he's so hot. She's like, the Silver Fox thing is working for him. And then I literally put this line in my notes that she said, it's like he absorbed Sean Connery. He is wearing the gray very well, much like Sean Connery did, to make the 007 connection there. But yeah, it looks great, sounds great. His voice, his delivery is just it's so great. And I will say, spoilers, I'm kind of jump to like the end here. Dr. Fate dies in this movie. He sacrifices himself essentially, and he says right before he dies, for the first time in 100 years, when I look in the future, I see nothing. And it's beautiful. And that's just such a great line to fitting into this character. It's kind of sad that, we finally get him and he's already got to die. And look, #PP, I don't know if the movie really earns that line, but when it's delivered by Pierce Brosnan, he puts everything into it, and it works, it hits. Great art to this character. I love his relationship with Hawkman. They obviously have a lot of history together, and they call each other old friend. That you kind of like a Professor Xavier Magneto kind of thing. And except they're both good guys. You get what I'm saying. It's a great performance.
And one of them is drastically older than the other one. Chris, I'm starting to think there's not a whole lot in common here, except they just are friends.
His helmet kind of looks like Magneto's helmet, Andrew. That's what I was getting at. Clearly.
No.
I could take this all out in editing, but I'm not going to, Andrew.
All right, fine.
It's a good performance. Mark Strong Award from both of us.
I like it a lot.
I think well deserved.
I agree with that final line he has. I think it does, like you said, it kind of sucks because it feels like there's a whole Justice Society movie we haven't seen, where these characters are a team, or these two are with a different team. And hey, hope springs eternal. But it's one of those things where, like, even if it never comes back around again, I'm glad we got this. And it's pretty cool. And the interesting thing about Dr. Fate is a lot of people have worn that helmet. So there is while the path for Kent Nelson may have not ended up the way we would have liked, there are a great many others that do eventually come into possession of that helmet one of which is the son of Hawkman. So a lot of potential where that could have gone.
Interesting.
Unfortunately, none of it's going to happen. Good night, sweet prince. Anyway,
Andrew, we got to talk about the lead of this movie, of course. Dwayne Johnson. No rock in these credits here. Just Dwayne Johnson as Black Adam. A role that he's been talking about for a very long time. A role that has evolved a lot over time before finally getting his own movie as Black Adam. And I think it's a really good fit. Obviously, he looks the part. I mean, you can see him as Black Adam. But I think what this movie does very, very well is it writes to Dwayne Johnson's strengths. Because The Rock isn't doing anything drastically different in this movie than any other movie that you've seen him in. And that's not even like a knock. I mean, The Rock, he has a brand. He does his thing. It's what you put The Rock in your movie for. But, he's big. He's a badass. He's unstoppable. He sweats a lot. He's The Rock, right? And he's doing his thing, but the movie gets a lot out of it. I mean, it gets a lot of surprisingly, comedy out of it. He's totally serious, totally badass. He's out for blood, but he's interacting with a young kid and his mom, and his mom's like, "Yeah, I don't want you to teach him about violence." And he goes, "I understand. You want his father to teach him about violence." And he delivers that middle of the road badass line, but because of the position that we're in, it becomes comedic without asking The Rock to do anything outside of what he normally does. And I just think it does that time and time again. It knows what performance you're going to get from The Rock, and it writes around it, and it works. I think this is a great casting as Black Adam, and I don't know if we'll ever see a Black Adam on screen again, but it'd be weird for it not to be The Rock at this point, after all this build up and seeing him in this role,
I agree. And they were very coy about that when the announcement of the new DCU, which is a much better title, was announced. People were kind of like, well, what's that mean for Rock? And they've kind of left the door open that obviously with multiverse stuff, anything can happen. So I think if they can find a way to work out something where The Rock comes back, they certainly would. No immediate plans, though. It's another kind of one of those things where it's unfortunate it's not going to continue. But The Rock, like I said, he's been talking about this forever. So at bare minimum, I'm glad he got to do it. Like you said, he looks the part. He's got the size. He's got the physicality. It is a bit off script for what he normally does, I do think. And I think that was refreshing for a lot of people. There is a surprising amount of humor they wring out of it, but there is a stoicness to the character and a seriousness that I do really enjoy. Seeing him kind of really employ for the first time in a while, and I like it. I mean, he's The Rock. We could, obviously there's a huge history to the man, and everybody knows who The Rock is. We don't spend too much time on him, but yeah, for a movie that he's been waiting 15 years to make, I'm glad he got to the finish line. And like you said, if there's ever another Black Adam down the line, I think they're going to be in a pretty uphill battle.
I remember when Shazam came out, and Zachary Levi in the lead role, who most people probably hadn't seen since Chuck, where he plays the nerdy tech guy. And people were like, "What's up with that suit? It's clearly stuffed, right? Are those rubber muscles?" And he was like, "No, guys, that's me. I worked out a lot. Yeah, I got real muscular." And then you see The Rock in this suit, and no one's asking questions. Yeah, they painted The Rock black. He's a massive human. That's totally viable. That's The Rock.
Yeah. People, they get jacked. It happens.
Just your average 52-year-old man,
Yeah. It's 100% natural, folks.
Aldous Hodge plays Hawkman. I love seeing Hawkman on the big screen, and it's not that I'm a huge Hawkman fan. I wear the character more just from the cursory regard from reading about other DC characters, but it's such a comic booky thing. Seeing him in on the comic book page, he's one of those characters you look at and like, well, this would never work in live action. The big old beak and the wings and stuff. And I love that they finally adapt it and they don't modernize it. They don't give him a techie suit. It's Hawkman. He's got the big beak. He's got these big gold wings. It's awesome. I think he looks great. The characterization, I mentioned he's kind of a hothead himself and butting heads with Black Adam, and they push that. They push that quite a bit, but there's this. They kind of acknowledge it too. Like he kind of gets called out for being too black and white about the world. We're heroes; those are villains. This is the way it goes. Like just not leaving any room for gray, and he gets called out for like the Justice Society's inaction whenever this country has been under military rule and oppression for decades, and they don't step in, and then all of a sudden, Black Adam shows up, and they feel like now it's their jurisdiction. I think the line used against him is it's very easy to divide the world into good and bad when you're the one drawing the lines. I was like, oh man, that's good, and I think he does learn a bit. That's kind of his arc throughout the movie. He kind of recognizes that maybe there is a little bit of gray in the world. So I think it's pretty well done, and I brought to life by Aldis. Good performance here.
Another alum of the show, I believe he's at least mentioned on our A Good Day to Die Hard episode. And
why is that, Andrew?
Because he's in A Good Day to Die Hard.
Okay, you said mentioned. I don't know if it was somebody who actually went.
I don't think he's like a main part.
I assume. Okay, I
but
gotcha.
I'm pretty sure I brought it up because he also has a small part in Die Hard 3. It's his first credited film on his Wikipedia here, but yeah, the way they play the character is a little interesting with a very didactic worldview, or not didactic, but just very binary. It's good and bad. Especially for a world like the DCEU, it seems very strange for a hero to kind of be like, we don't kill people. Villains kill people. It's like, I don't know if you've seen what Superman's done in this world, dude, but you might need to understand there's some exceptions here. But and I think that was a deliberate choice to kind of create that kind of unwavering stance and then put him in the face of something that falls in between very heavily. But like you said, just seeing this character on screen, they're messing with the design a little bit, but like they're not like trying to explain how the wings, like where the wings go. They don't try to explain that. They don't really spend too much time on it. He's just Hawkman. He's got his stuff. He's got his weapon that turns into a mace, an axe, whatever he wants. He's got this anger, like he's obviously quick to get into some measuring contests with Black Adam here, trying to kind of prove who's the tougher one. It's Black Adam, Hawkman. I don't know how to tell you this gently. He's gonna eat your lunch if you stick with this too long. But I think Aldis does a great job with it. I think this was a great pick. I love the look of the ship they have. I think it's a very cool design. I love how the technology looks. And again, just seeing that on the big screen. We talk about yellow spandex moments, which was the infamous moment from X-Men in the year 2000 where Wolverine was kind of criticizing their black leather jumpsuits, and Cyclops replies, "What would you prefer, yellow spandex?" And a lot of people watching it were like, "Well, yeah." Why
I
are you
would
saying
like
that like
that,
it's a bad thing? There was a run, obviously, mostly in the aughts there, where when they were making movies, there was this concerted effort to make the heroes look cooler. That X-Men trend followed into a lot of things. And so I could have easily seen Hawkman being somebody where they were like, oh, well, we gotta figure out how to make Hawkman like look cool, or we gotta make him look like tougher. And I'm reminded a little bit of when Batman Beyond introduced a new version of Hawkman called Warhawk, who had like the armored metal suit, and they like tried to make it all different and cool. And don't get me wrong, it looks cool, but like to see them just not shy away from it and just be like, you know what? Here's Hawkman doing Hawkman things, looking exactly like you would expect Hawkman to look. I was like, that's pretty cool. Hawkman is somebody that, I mean, very similar to Black Adam. I don't know that there's any serious diehard Hawkman fans out there. He's a character that kind of struggles, and it's easy for him to get lost in the shuffle just because Hawkman's thing is that he flies. Lots of
Andrew,
people fly.
Andrew. He has a mace as well. Don't forget about the mace.
He flies and he has a mace.
There you go.
Now, the issue, obviously, is that lots of superheroes fly. Tons of them. Lots of them. So Hawkman's had, like, several attempts at stuff over the years to kind of create this mythology. There's versions of the character that are reincarnations of the same two souls over time, him and Hawkgirl. That was a big recurring thing for a while there. It might still be. I haven't read a Hawkman comic in a long time. I remember reading those original JSA comics, and there was a big story, the return of Hawkman. It was Hawkman coming back. There's versions of Hawkman Reason Alien from another planet, and they really don't spend too much time on it. It's Carter Hall. He's got his house, his Xavier mansion with his jet hidden under the ground. He's got all that stuff going. I guess, really, he's got the house. He is Professor Xavier and Dr.
See, Andrew, coming around.
I guess it's right. But I like his performance here. I like what he's doing. I think he's doing a good job. And some may be like it's a little much how extreme he is, but I think the idea is to create that dichotomy and create that kind of harsh transition and make the character realize that the way he has been going about things, maybe not completely correct.
Noah Centineo plays Adam Smasher. Albert Rothstein is the character's name. And this is where on the superhero front, I start losing track a little bit, just based on my personal knowledge. I mean, real quick about the performance. It's great. It's fun. He's obviously, him and Cyclone are the younger members, and they really play that up. They're inexperienced. They're still kind of in training, provide a lot of comic relief. I like it all. I like the look. It looks great. Now, Andrew, I'm familiar with the Atom, who is the shorthand DC's version of Ant-Man, or vice versa. I don't know who came first, but you get the idea. And I've always known the Atom to shrink really small. And I assume he can also grow big like Ant-Man can, Ant-Man, Giant Man. I personally haven't seen it happen, but it wouldn't shock me. Now here we're looking at Adam Smasher, and he talks a lot about how it's his, his uncle's suit, and he's not the first one to wear it, so it's a little bit different. But he only grows big in this movie. Andrew, can he also get small, or are these two separate characters? One gets small, one gets big. What's going on here? Who is Adam Smasher?
Okay, so Chris, great question. Glad you asked. Adam Smasher has a relation to the Atom, but not in that way. So the original Atom, the first superhero to ever carry the name of Atom, is a gentleman named Al Pratt, who in this film is actually portrayed by a surprise cameo of Henry Winkler. Hey, so pretty cool. Now Al
cool
Pratt,
indeed, Andrew.
He has a very strange costume. He's got like the blue full face with like a blue cape, but then he's got like this weird, I can't even describe it to you. It's very strange. Bare legs, very golden age. And originally, Al Pratt had no powers. He initially just trains. He's a very Captain America type story. He's kind of sad, kind of small. Starts training, gets better. And so he has no metahuman abilities when he first starts being a superhero. Not uncommon for Golden Age superheroes. But he's a boxer, he's a physicist, and he's an athlete. He eventually gets powers from a situation just because it gives him those generic strength, stamina, durability, speed things, kind of a Captain America adjacent power set. And he's the original version of the Atom. Now, in the 50s and the 60s, DC revamped almost all of their superheroes. The only ones who stayed the same were basically Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Everybody else kind of got a new version, and they were all tinged with like what was hot at the time, which was science fiction and stuff. So that's how you get Green Lantern. Instead of a magical lantern, it's space cops. It's how you get the Flash. Instead of this, he's now a police scientist with these crazy sci-fi powers and these colorful villains. The Atom was another one like that. He went from being this kind of Captain America power set type character. Now he shrinks, and it's, Fantastic Voyage adjacent type stuff with this version of the Atom. Now, Al Pratt has a godson named Albert Rothstein, who is Adam Smasher. So this is a new divergent line created directly from the original Atom that again featured in the Jeff Johns JSA, where they were kind of introducing a lot of new, or kind of reintroducing several characters as these new legacy heroes. So Albert Rothstein is introduced in the comics as the godson of Al Pratt. I believe he's his nephew in this movie. But when they revamped him, he had mass manipulation, so he could get small, but the biggest thing he typically did was get big. That was kind of his play. That's kind of what he did. I've never really seen Atom Smasher get small. Kind of gets bigger. That's his thing. So they really differentiate Atom Smasher from the Atom. They kind of made it so he just grows bigger. And it's an interesting line with some of these DC heroes, as that 5-minute explanation points out to you. But yes, no relation to the shrinking Atom, a direct familial relation to the original Atom, who had no size powers of any kind, and to differentiate Atom Smasher from the Atom, he only gets bigger. I was a lot faster.
That explains that. All right, well done. Yeah, okay, interesting. They're in an interesting place here because even if a lot of DC characters might technically predate Marvel characters, in today's landscape, the MCU is so big that that's a lot of people's initial frame of reference. So Hawkeye suddenly looks like a knockoff of Falcon, or Dr. Fate might look like a poor man's Doctor Strange. Atom Smasher obviously is going to be drawing comparisons to Ant-Man, and there's nothing they can do about that. But what they can do visually is make the powers and suits look distinct, and I think they do a great job on the special effects with that. Like Dr. Fate having this gold aesthetic to all of his powers and his force fields and dimension, or Hawkman focusing on his axe and his mace, or Atom Smasher here almost has like a Deadpool style mask. That's like whenever he talks and stuff, that's always what it reminded me of. Sort of a different texture, and they don't focus so much on him like losing energy or burning out. Like when he's big, he's just a big dude that can smash some stuff up, which I thought was pretty cool. I think they made some right lateral moves to kind of make sure these characters all looked distinct from what audiences had already seen in superhero movies.
I agree. No notes.
And just to round out the team, we do have Quintessa Swindle playing Cyclone, another young new member of the team. And there's a great moment where the two young members meet each other on the plane, and Atom Smasher, he says, "What's your power?" She goes, "Wind. How about you?" "I can get big." And that's it, Andrew. That's all. We're at a point in superhero movies where you can just here's like a little bit later in the movie, Cyclone kind of does her origin in like 2 lines. She's like, "Oh yeah, it's nanobots. That's how I do my power. A scientist kidnapped me when I was 15 and injected me with this, and now I use it for good." And that's it. It's like 2 lines of dialogue, and okay, that's all I need to know about this character. Let's move forward. And I'm not saying that you should never do origin movies ever in superheroes, but you don't have to do a big long backstory for every single character. Audiences can get on board with the power set a lot easier now, and it's just we've come a long way from a few decades ago where superheroes could only exist in a universe where they were the only superhero. You got to dedicate a movie to how they get the powers, how they choose their name. And no, there's a lot of superheroes in this universe. They're just going to show up and do their thing.
I agree. This is actually a really surprise. This is one of those kind of late stage, newer characters that you're kind of surprised to see kind of get tapped for the big screen. This character kind of technically originates in the comic Kingdom Come, which was in the mid-90s, but kind of debuts as this version of Cyclone in 2007. So kind of very similar to something like Bucky being reimagined as the Winter Soldier, kind of one of those later ideas that we're kind of running with. And the story she tells, basically the same story from the comics. She gets kidnapped in the comics. It's by T.O. Morrow. Get it? His name is T.O. Morrow.
Yeah, that's good.
But he's one of the people who created the robot Red Tornadoes. And he basically infects her with nanobites to give her powers. She is the granddaughter of Ma Hunkel, who is the original Red Tornado, who was just a really, really tough woman you didn't want to mess with. who wore a bucket on her head. She was not.
That sounds like someone I don't want to mess with, to be fair.
Yeah, if a pardon the language, if a middle-aged woman built like a brick shit house came at me with a bucket on her head, I'm not going to do anything to her. I'm going to leave her alone. But she was a character. So this was another thing with the JSA. They were always looking to do new versions of legacy characters, introduce new legacy characters, and kind of continue the lineages of some of these older heroes that had kind of been lost. And it was pretty cool. And then obviously we're adapting this to screen, keeping it by and large the same, even keeping the names the same. It's just cool little Easter eggs for people that do know these characters. And I think she does a great job with, admittedly, her and Atom Smasher have some more limited screen time, kind of more augmenting our big cast, which is obviously focused superhero-wise on Black Adam, Hawkman, and Dr. Fate. But they both do a fantastic job. Their powers look really, really cool. She's somebody that's like definitely unique that like we've not really seen those powers kind of portrayed. I guess Storm from the X-Men is kind of the closest thing.
That was the closest, but like it's
but
been
even
a minute
still
and it's
not
different.
really the same.
Yeah.
But still, very cool to see. And yeah, just especially like I said, being a fan of these characters, just seeing them on the big screen is going to be cool.
That takes care of our heroes in this movie, but there is a civilian family at the heart of this movie that I think all do a great job. Like Sarah Shahi, who plays Adriana Tomas. And she is sort of at the front of the forefront of the freedom fighters. She's the one trying to uncover these ancient powers to hopefully find the strength to overthrow the oppressive regime, and incidentally comes across Black Adam. But she is a force to be reckoned with throughout this movie, even after the superheroes arrive. Her son is captured for a good portion of this movie, and she's fighting to get him back, but she is always there in the battle doing what she can, and I think it's a solid performance.
I agree. Adriana Tamaz is whether or not it would have turned into something would have been interesting. That Andrea Thomas is kind of it was the identity of ISIS in an original show that was there that eventually got folded into the comics. And even the Arrowverse kind of played with this a little bit. And so there was definitely some seeds being set there for ISIS, who is typically presented as a female counterpart of Black Adam.
I mean, they would need a new name.
Yeah. I mean, it's unfortunate because ISIS is this like very prominent name in Egyptian folklore, mythology, and yeah, can't do that anymore.
I'm not sure you could have a hero with that name. I'm just throwing that out there.
No, I think you're very correct. So the name of the character is definitely an Easter egg, potentially hinting at things to come. But I think Sarah does a great job here, kind of illustrating that kind of ground level view of this. You know, you kind of get that with superhero movies. You have this kind of galactic, planet, international scale where we're kind of looking at the larger threat. Her character does a great job of magnifying the kind of real world threat that, you know, what is living in a situation like this like? You know, when you feel ignored by the superheroes, things like that. And so I think she does a great job portraying that, kind of acting as kind of the conduit to the Kondak people. And it's a great performance.
And then her son, played by Bodhi Sabanji, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, plays the character Aman Tomas. And I think this is an excellent performance. I didn't see much. I think it's one of their first roles. I don't think they have a huge body of work before this, but I think they're doing an excellent job. One of the strengths, I mean, I'm reminded a lot of Shazam for obvious reasons, but that first Shazam movie is really relying on some kids, some teenagers to carry a lot of weight, a lot of humor, a lot of sort of their superhero knowledge comes into play a lot as they interact with these superpowered characters. And so there's like there's a clear sort of analogy to, I think Freddy's his name in the Shazam movies. But he's doing a great job kind of being buddies with Black Adam, teaching him how to be a superhero. You got to have a catchphrase, got to have a cool name. Holds his own against all the adult actors he's got to share the screen with. So I thought it was just a really good performance.
Yeah, this is another name that is hinting potentially at something in the future. Osiris, who was another Black Adam family type character. Appeared very heavily during the 52 series, and was later brought back in Blackest Night, Brightest Day. So we were definitely potentially building out to a Black Adam family of characters, very similar to the Marvel family as we had over there, which could have set us up for a very nice confrontation, Dwayne.
Never gonna happen.
Dwayne. But yeah, he does a great performance. Again, he's kind of, it's interesting. It's always funny when you see characters like this because he's got superhero stuff all over his room. So he's got like Superman and Batman posters and Flash posters and stuff. And it's like, so these characters like are like actual comic books in this world, or are people just drawing posters of Superman? And I don't know. It's always interesting to me when I see that because it implies that the real world heroes are so popular they've birthed comic books of themselves, which will always be funny to me. But yeah, he's the one who kind of tries to kind of acclimate Black Adam to our world, our modern world, since he's been asleep for thousands of years, and tries to get him to understand some of the nuances of modern culture to mixed results. But yeah, it's good stuff. And at the end, he gets to kind of get in on the action and be a hero, and pretty cool.
Well, Andrew, I think that covers our main cast, which means it's time that we jump into the scenes of this film. And of course, we're going to start at the high point with the best scene of the movie, or at least our personal favorite. So, I hand it to you, Andrew. In your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Black Adam?
I got to go with the Justice Society versus Black Adam. This is not deep into the movie, but basically the original conflict and the ring that involves the JSA into this situation is Black Adam and how dangerous he potentially is. And so they bring him in, they bring in this group, and their job is to stop him and then get him in prison. And, you know, Hawkman is dead set on this. He's like, our job is to imprison you. And Black Adam is kind of like, no, you. So this leads to a big, drawn-out fight. It's many minutes long, but you get everybody here shown. So many minutes, minutes upon minutes. It's not all the minutes, Chris. That's impossible.
A lot of the minutes. You got to admit, it's a lot of the minutes, Andrew.
It's a lot of the minutes, but not all the minutes. That would be terrifying for reality. But I can't watch this fight forever, Chris. But you get everybody's powers on full display here, because to this point, you haven't seen what a lot of these people do, or you've heard but not seen. Like, so we get them all on display here, and everybody gets really cool moments to shine. Obviously, we see Atom Smasher able to temporarily take down Black Adam. We get to see Cyclone use her powers, and they present them in a very cool way. And then obviously we get some extended Hawkman Black Adam fights here, which I think are very, very cool, showing those two characters kind of butting up against each other. And obviously Dr. Fate starts utilizing his powers here. He can, create multiples of himself, things like that. It's all just very, very cool to just have this conflict. It's how this sort of thing should be done early on, get it out of the way. That way we can team up later. But I think it's when the movie is, for me, it's kind of the most fun. The stakes are kind of lower, obviously, because it's not the big bad trying to destroy the world. So you're just kind of enjoying watching this big superhero action. And you get a sense of what everybody is and what they're like. And again, just seeing these characters on the screen, seeing their powers in the forefront. Because not all these heroes take part in our actual kind of finale. So I dig it. I like seeing these characters in action and just seeing Black Adam fight the Justice Society on the big screen. I mean, how cool is that?
It's pretty dang cool, Andrew. I think it's the first time we get to see Cyclone using her powers, and the way they integrate like colors into her palette, she makes these like these cyclones, and like the greens and the blues, and then like there'll be like the slow motion moment of clarity where you see her in the middle of it, and she'll direct the wind to send the pipes flying up Black Adam at one point. Some really cool way to visualize that. I like seeing Adam Smasher in action for the first time, and you get a lot of his personality, because usually it's Dr. Fate and Hawkman up front, and then they'll call in the kids for very specific missions, like whether it's saving civilians or coming in for one blow, getting out of the way, but they're not out there in the field as strategists. So they call Adam Smasher in to finally trap Black Adam. He ends up kneeling on, or punching him into the ground. And there's this moment where they're all fighting, and you see Adam Smasher running down the street, and he says, "I'm coming. I'm zeroing in on your location." And then like 2 blocks behind him, you see a big explosion. And he's like, oh, and he's got to turn around and run back the other direction. He's running the completely wrong way. There's so many great little moments of humor peppered in throughout in a way where it's not undercutting anything serious. It's just keeping this whole thing fun, informing you about these characters, the different personalities. I mean, the action scenes throughout this movie, I think, are all really well done in that regard, and balancing all of that, the character moments and the fun action. And this is a great example of that. And like you said, this is really the only time you get all of them in one fight together. And so I think for that reason, Andrew, it's a very good pick.
Thank you.
I'm picking a different scene, but for me, it's a scene where more like I had some, I don't know, I wasn't hyped to watch this movie for reasons I already mentioned in our intro. I wasn't dreading it or anything, but like, all right, let's just let's watch this to see what it's all about. And early on, there's moments where like I'm kind of like this. I'm kind of enjoying this. And the first big action scene we get is Black Adam being awakened, and he just wastes everybody. And this goes on for a few minutes. He awakens, he kills everyone like in there, like in his like tomb area, and then he breaks out and takes on like an entire military force. It's another extended action sequence. And I think it is just so much fun. It's so cool. We're at a point in the movie where eventually they make Black Adam the sort of anti-hero vigilante, somewhat good, and he kind of eases up on the killing people thing. But early on, he can go all out. He's got no moral barometer, and he can just rip people apart. There's times when he will just very quickly, punch them, they fly across the room, they're dead. Other times he'll pick someone up by their neck and electrocute them until their flesh falls off their bones in this gnarly looking fatality. It's so cool. He does have a little hint of goodness here, because Adriana, the woman that awakens him, she's about to be crushed by rocks, and he kind of just offhand, he just kind of shoots some lightning over there, destroys the debris, and flies off. Just like minimal effort, but he's like, this woman won't die. She let me out. So we got that little bit of hint that there might be something there. But otherwise, he's just killing people. He flies up into this tomb, and literally there's just bodies falling as he's continuing to just kill people. And then he breaks out of the mountain, Andrew, and he just keeps on killing. We get this really cool slow-mo action sequence where it's playing Paint It Black. And he electrocutes everyone. He just like in this chain electrocution, like zaps the entire army. He's moving like almost like Quicksilver in those famous X-Men scenes. Like he'll grab a grenade, he puts it in someone's mouth, and when you finally come out of the slow-mo scene, everyone reacts to what he just did in the blink of an eye, including the guy with the grenade in his mouth, who he says "oh shit" and then he blows up. It's pretty good. Yeah, it's really fun. It ends with with a shot that I saw in the trailer a million times, where they shoot a missile at him. But Andrew, do you know what happens when someone shoots a missile at The Rock? He throws it right Black Adam. You have no idea how long I've held on to that joke, Andrew.
Oh, no. No.
Andrew is dead.
Folks, I want to thank you for the years of patronage. I want to thank you all for taking the time. It's been a real
It's all
journey.
been leading to this. This is the joke that I made this. Well, we created this podcast for, Andrew. It was leading to this joke right here.
I want to thank you all for taking the time. Chris's passing is deeply traumatic for all of us. I hope one day the person responsible is brought to justice. There are currently no leads. They don't think it was someone local. This is unfortunate. But the legacy of the show stands on its own. So thank you. Any further developments, I will let you know. Our merch, obviously, still available. All proceeds going to the Save Chris Fund. But yeah, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Andrew throws it right back at him.
Son of a... No! I'm going to have to actually kill you now.
I will say it's funny because that scene... That kind of informed my entire opinion of this movie during the marketing. I'm like, all right, The Rock is Black Adam. He's an ultimate badass. We just see him just crush, and I'm like, that just wasn't very exciting to me.
Right.
But because of the things I talked about earlier, where they work around his style and personality and inject this humor into it, they make it work. Suddenly, I'm having fun during those scenes rather than like, oh man, The Rock's so awesome. It's just like, I don't know. It's fun. It's cool. And it's not so much like, look at this badass. It's like, look at this fun action sequence, especially once, he meets up with the kid and they start developing catchphrases and trying to work those into his fights and stuff. Like, it's just really good. But I just thought, this is obviously one of the most expensive scenes in the movie. I think it shows. I think it looks great. And it's just a lot of fun.
I hate you. I hate you. No, folks, don't encourage that ever. No, I do think this.
The phones are ringing off the Andrew. Listeners are calling in right now. They thought that was the
you don't even have
joke
a phone.
of 2023.
Jesus. Oh God. Oh no. Oh God. Guys, you have no idea how much I'm holding back right now. That being said, this scene is really great. And it was actually a lot more brutal than I was expecting. Like some of the stuff he does here, like where he just like holds the dude by his neck and just like disintegrates him with lightning. I was like, whoa. I was like, this is that kind of movie. And like just seeing The Rock kind of again. Like, I've joked about it before, #PP, that The Rock kind of feels like focus group the person these days. Where, like, it just feels like everything about his image is so carefully curated that there's no room for anything even remotely possibly controversial ever. The joke out there, too, is that, like, when he got booed about no Henry Cavill and Black Adam at Comic-Con, he literally went above and kept going up the WB ladder until he could get Henry Cavill in the movie. So to see him actually being like that kind of brutal and violent was surprising. And it's kind of what the character is supposed to be doing. So I was pleasantly surprised to see some of that stuff. Chris, that's not the joke I was going to make in response to, do you know what happens when The Rock grabs a missile out of midair? I was going to say, the same thing that happens to everything else.
That is the true greatest joke of all time. How can I forget?
Guys, we are so unbelievably funny that I can't take it. I was all queued up for that until you jumped in.
Well, I feel kind of bad because that is pretty good. But look, now our listeners, they got
the
both
world
jokes.
has both jokes now.
They got
so
both,
it's all
both
fine.
jokes in the world.
But amazing. Anyway,
Andrew, is that a bad line? Is it so bad it's good? That is like a notorious line from that movie now. I remember hating it as a kid, being like, that's not a joke. Yeah. That's not clever. Why did you say it? And then now I'm like, that's just That's awesome. I don't know if that's ironic appreciation or what, but like I don't. It's so confounding that it's like.
I think that's what it is. Like it's so. I wouldn't say that it's. I think in the movie, in that moment, it's like a bad line, but it's one of those things that's like. It's like so underwhelming. It's like you're building to this moment of like, oh man, what does happen? It's like the same thing happens to everything else. It's like, oh, so you're just telling me the truth now. Like you're just illustrating. So like it's become this like meme almost where like it's this moment of like you can just like undercut something by saying that line now. It's like it's become like the perfect line to say when you're trying to subvert the expectations of saying something.
Yeah, it'd be like, do you know what happens when you put an ice cube in the microwave? It turns into water. I was like, wait, what? That's what I expected to happen. You made me overthink it. Of course.
Exactly. Yeah, I think I still in the movie though, in that moment, I would say it's #PP a bad line. But we've turned it into something greater, as you're supposed to do with all symbols of that nature. But yeah, so anyway, long story short, great scene, Chris. Love seeing the Rock get a little bit to the darker side with some more just showing, kind of illustrating very clearly what Black Adam's powers are and what he's capable of. And that dude found out what happens when you get struck by lightning. So,
what do you think about this movie not calling him Black Adam at all? The entire runtime. They keep hinting at it. And then it's how they close the movie. Again, without actually saying it, but implied they're about to say it. They pull a fantastic, a Fant Four Stick. Remember what they did at the end of that movie?
I think Waller calls him Black Adam at the end, doesn't she? And then
and I guess in the mid-credit scene, you're right.
Yeah,
true
but
enough,
like,
true enough.
They have a big moment where they're like, they say Teth Adam is too old-fashioned, so he needs a different name, and it was like, oh yeah, Black Adam, much more hip and current.
I mean, yeah.
#PP. But I'm okay with it because, like, obviously, like it's. I mean, it's like Man of Steel to a degree as well. Like, he's not Superman for most of that movie. He's just this thing. Like like you know who he is, but the movie never calls him Superman until the end, really. I think it can work. It doesn't bother me. I think it's an interesting kind of way to take it because you're calling him by his real name, Teth Adam. And then, like you said, our big kind of last reveal is his name is now Black Adam. And it was, yeah, it's fine. Like, I think just running with it the way they did, it works.
I'm just glad they didn't do the subversion thing where it's like, what should we call you? And there's a big build up, and he's like,
White Adam.
Darth Vader Adam. Yeah, why something stupid. Like, no, that's silly. Or he didn't say Black Adam, and they go, that's dumb. Like, they never undercut it. So like, for that reason, yeah,
they didn't do the yellow spandex moment.
They didn't do the yellow. That's true. This movie is the opposite of yellow spandex moments.
It really is, to be fair.
Hawkman has a giant beak.
Dr. Fate has his giant gold helmet. Cyclone has her, like, striped socks with her big boots. And Atom Smasher's got... That's a screen-accurate Atom Smasher costume. Like, the heroes all look exactly how they're supposed to look. A lot of them look like they jumped right off the page. This movie is not shying away from these designs and these looks. And I'm here for it.
The humor was very surprising to me in this movie. I thought it was funny throughout. To me, it felt a lot more like the first Shazam movie than the second Shazam movie felt like to the first one. Did I word that correctly? This movie reminded me more of Shazam 1 than Shazam 2 reminded me of Shazam 1. It felt more. God, I hope I got the point across. The tone felt closer.
If I can,
clean this up for me, Andrew.
You're saying that Black Adam feels more like the original Shazam than Shazam 2 feels like the original Shazam.
That's it.
Yes. So you're basically saying that, like, the humor, the tone, the style of, like, interjecting the right amounts of humor into what could be seen as a relatively dire situation, that strikes that balance a lot better than Shazam 2 does.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not trying to be backhanded about Shazam 2. I do like it, and maybe we'll talk about it one day. But there was definitely it didn't recapture that feeling I had from the first one, whereas I think Black Adam, for the most part, is doing that, especially in those earlier scenes, the first half of this, especially when it's him and the kid interacting with each other. I love the running gag of the catchphrase. I think what they come up with is, "Tell them that the man in black sent you." And
he's like forgetting to say it, or like
yeah, the first
says
time
it halfway.
he kills all these people, and then he says it. He's like, "Well, yeah, don't say it to me. Say it to them, though. But before you kill him, catchphrase, then kill him." Yes. Then he's carrying this guy. He's flying with him through the air, and the guy says, "Let me go." And he's like, "You should really choose your words more carefully." And he drops him, and then he remembers, "Tell them that the man in black." And then the guy hits the ground.
Scream. He like yells it at him as he's falling down towards the ground. It was it was
very
wonderful.
good, very good.
Yeah, good balance of that. Works really well. No, it's an interesting observation, but I agree overall. Like, it really is striking that tone. Obviously, outside the fact that Shazam is or Black Adam rather is a much more brutal character. But in the first movie, you have that whole savannah with the demons and everything, and all of that stuff is
that boardroom
hardcore.
scene in that first Shazam movie is dark. Yeah,
it is dark. Like, and you those guys aren't walking out of that room. So it's definitely injecting the right amounts of levity to kind of stop what could be as a pretty dire situation from kind of taking over the tone of the movie. No, I agree. It's a great call there, Chris. You're good at that.
Well, hey, thank you. It's interesting they are able to get that dynamic though, because Black Adam is not a kid in this movie. And Andrew, I'm curious if you can maybe fill in like the comic counterpart, but throughout most of this movie, they show you the backstory of this country ages ago, and you're made to believe that this kid that starts a revolution is The Rock, is Black Adam, that we see awoken. And then it's revealed pretty late in the movie that it's actually that kid's father that was given those powers. The kid died. Very sad. That's why he's so full of rage. But in those early scenes, which reminded me of Shazam, I just kind of assume that there's probably a kid in there. Maybe at one point he's going to say the word. He'll switch back to a kid, but it's not the case. So I think it's all the more impressive that we get that fun dynamic, like kind of the boy and his superhero friend that's actually a grown man, but we still get that fun dynamic of him teaching him about catchphrases and stuff because, in Shazam, we know it's a kid, so he's also giddy about having a cool name and stuff, but it's a little bit different here with the man out of time concept they have going on, but it still came together, it still worked. But what do you think about that backstory that they give here and sort of the late stage twist that it's not the child that we are led to believe? What do you think about it, and is that true to fashion for this character?
It's not really true to fashion of the character. Like I said, it's definitely a little off script, but I think it works for the version that they're going with. I kind of saw this coming just because in the past, the father of the child is clearly like The Rock's head and The Rock's voice, and like it definitely didn't help. I think if they were actively trying to discourage you from that conclusion, they should have tried to mask that a little bit more. I do still like the reveal, though. I think it's because the idea is that the champion perished fighting this kind of champion of Sabak, and kind of destroyed the palace and ended up kind of dead / in a tomb. This reveal instead that it's actually the champion's father who got the powers. He doesn't think that he's worthy, doesn't think he deserves them. I think that's a really interesting ripple, and I think it works for this version of the character as they're presenting it. I have always liked that's Black Adam's thing. There's actually this really good Black Adam miniseries they did, kind of in the aftermath of Infinite Crisis. So this would have been back 2007 or 8 or so, where Black Adam has been transformed back, but his change word has been switched because that's something that they've done sometimes. So Shazam and Black Adam had this big conflict because Black Adam took part in this big villain plot, and it resulted in this big throwdown fight where Shazam was able to get him to transform back, but then changed his shift word to something that Black Adam doesn't know. He has no idea what it is. So this comic is about kind of Black Adam in this post Infinite Crisis world, kind of dealing with the fact that he can transform, but he has no idea how to because he doesn't know what that word is.
And so there's like 4 issues where he's just reading a dictionary from front to back.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's 6 issues though. Dictionary's long, man.
Good point.
No, so he's on this journey, and I think he tries to find like other ways to reinstate his powers or ways that he can change the word to something he wants. And he can't figure it out, and he ends up in Billy's hometown. And I love this scene because he's sitting in a diner, and this dude the people are talking to him, and he's kind of just trying to do the "how do you do, fellow humans" kind of thing, where he's just trying to be normal. But he's still, because that's the thing that's interesting, is that Kingdom Come reveals that adult Billy Batson looks exactly like Shazam. That's a big twist in Kingdom Come, where throughout the whole book, a lot of people that are hanging out with Lex Luthor are terrified because he's got Shazam standing behind him. They find out later it's just been Billy Batson the whole time. And they're all kind of annoyed. They're just like, we've been sitting here in fear of Billy Batson this whole time. This is ridiculous. Like, how did nobody assume that that Billy Batson grown up would look like Shazam? Why did nobody make that conclusion? Black Adam's the same way. Adult Black Adam is just a less buff version of changed Black Adam. So, but in this comic, one of the things I love is he's sitting at this diner, and he asks the guy, he's like, what's your biggest, what are you known for? What's your big thing? And the guy's like, oh, we have a really good chocolate egg cream. And Black Adam's like, all right, I'll have one of those chocolate egg creams. And he transforms. And he's just like, oh, Billy, ever the child. So that scene will like live in my head, because he's like literally like sitting at a diner, like the bar of a diner, and just like has the lightning has struck and he's turned into Black Adam just in the middle, and he's just like, he's like more annoyed than anything that he's found out what his change word is. But,
is that the whole thing? Chocolate egg cream?
Yeah, it's the whole line.
Wow.
So, I love that book. That was a really fun one. I think Peter Tomasi, who later wrote everything at DC, that was one of his early things that he did. But
what's the name of that book specifically?
It's called Black Adam.
Oh, okay. Black Adam by Peter Tomasi?
Yep. Doug Mahnke drew it. Mahnke, however you say that. But
he was a major influence on Doug Beetle.
That wasn't as good as your last one.
Nothing ever will be, Andrew. I've peaked.
No, we've both. It's over for both of us. Yeah, I guess we should talk about the finale. We can get there. Yeah.
Let's talk about the finale. It's like hashtag PP. I think is a reason we both chose other action scenes as our favorite. I think fighting this demon late stage isn't as compelling as the fights we saw earlier. But we do get the good character moment that I mentioned with Dr. Fate and his death. And you get a great fight with Hawkman using Dr. Fate's abilities, using his helmet, that I think is very cool. And you get Black Adam ripping the devil in half, which is also a very cool way to end the fight. So yeah, I guess there's a few highlights throughout this last fight.
Oh yeah, definitely. I do like the kind of revelation that Dr. Fate has, that imprisoning Black Adam, which they do get him to like agree to at a certain point, because he kind of believes that the powers are a curse more than a blessing. Dr. Fate realizes that he's like, oh, Black Adam's the only way out of this. He's like, there's nothing else. Like, I guess, yeah. We'll ignore that, Superman's right over there, but apparently. But it's interesting that Dr. Fate gets to that realization, because like I said, one of his things is see in the future. And after they imprison Black Adam, he still sees that same future. And he's just kind of like, uh-oh, that's not good. I've made a huge mistake. That sort of thing, where like, this is not good. So he kind of sacrifices himself. He kind of builds a cage around the temple or the throne room that Sabbac is in. Sabbac, I'm sorry. And reaches out to Black Adam, who eventually emerges and is able to change back into his powered version. And that leads to this final fight, which is pretty awesome. We do get Dr. Fate and Sabbac kind of in this fight, which is pretty cool. Then we get Hawkman and Sabbac with the Dr. Fate powers, and then ultimately we get the knockdown, drag-out fight with Sabbac and Black Adam. Kind of just runs through a bunch of people in a row there. And in the background of this, which is cool, is that the people of Kahndaq rise up against this Legion of the Undead. Adriana works with Kareem, played by Muhammad Amir, to kind of assist. He has a funny moment earlier in the film where he gets shot and he thinks he's going to die. And Dr. Fate's like, nah, this isn't how you die. And he's like, I don't die like this. And he's like, just avoid electricity. And he's like, I'm an electrician. How am I supposed to do that? But it means he runs into this final fight, like headstrong, not worrying about anything because he knows electricity is what kills him. So he runs into this fight with nothing to fear, which I think was just a really interesting little funny thing to do. So
that's a great line. Don't worry, I die by electricity. And then he just goes and fights zombies.
Yeah, why shouldn't he? And then Eamon himself actually rallies the people of Kahndaq to assist them as well. So while you've got this big superpowered fight going up top, you've got this street level story of the people kind of rising up to fight this issue themselves to a degree, which I think is very, very cool. Kind of, again, the people rising up and taking back their land, in this case, quite literally from the armies of hell. And like I said, this ultimately results in Black Adam ripping the dude in half, which is awesome. The only thing that would have been cooler first is if he'd ripped the horns off, then ripped him in half.
Well, the horns are the handles for each side, Andrew.
Well, you just leave enough to grab. You can rip off the bulk of them and leave enough. Give yourself enough leverage.
You thought about this.
Oh, it's one of my things that I always loved in the first Hellboy movie, where like the horns fully form and they're like, fulfill your destiny, and he basically breaks off his own horns and stabs Rasputin with them and goes, nah, fam. And I'm just like, yeah, dude, that's awesome. Anytime I see Demon's horns getting ripped off, I'm all for it. So, and in this case, he's the bad guy, so I don't feel bad either. But yeah, so cool stuff all around. Like I said, this kind of veers deep into the classic superhero finale, Sky Portal, army of fodder on the ground while our big heroes have a fight in the sky. But it's still a lot of fun. Seeing the JSA doing all their things, interacting with each other, Black Adam kind of getting his big showdown, kind of reclaiming his powers for himself after not feeling like he's worthy of having them. It's pretty cool. Anyway, I did just want to also point out that Jhamon Hansu does reprise his role as the Wizard here briefly. We also get Jennifer Holland reprising her role from the Suicide Squad as Amelia Harcourt. And then Viola Davis from various Suicide Squad media as well does come back, and they factor in at various points throughout it. But yeah, this whole finale, this whole setup, it kind of reaffirms that Black Adam has the powers for himself, and he's going to use these powers to help the people of Kahndaq. And that is a classic kind of hallmark of Black Adam's character, is kind of ruling over Kahndaq with this kind of tension where the world doesn't quite know if they can trust him or not. And his stance is basically, I don't care. You don't think you can trust me? That's your problem, not mine. Doesn't go out of his way to make any friends. They do make a point. There is a very iconic cover of 52 where
on the throne.
Yeah, on the throne, and they do the moment where he kind of sits on the throne and like shifts around just enough that he recreates that cover image just perfectly. It's kind of like Batman v Superman, where Zack Snyder goes out of his way to do the Dark Knight Returns, like diving through the air with lightning in the background. Yeah. And it's funny to me because like that's a genuinely iconic Batman image. There are no iconic images of Black Adam, but they still found one to use for this. That's pretty fun. But it's cool. And like I said, just seeing this character on the big screen. I like when he comes back too. He's got the clearly well-defined costume now. Like they make the gloves and the boots like a much brighter gold. The lightning bolt's much more prominent. So they're kind of just, again, reaffirming that he's confident in these abilities in this role now. And he's ready to take what comes with that. So, good stuff.
I gotta say, though, one of my notes, Andrew, is skinny Dwayne Johnson is jarring. It is so weird to see that head on a normal body. And the thing is, it should just look normal. Because it's not like Captain America, where they're putting Chris Evans on this, like, very skinny, small person. They put him on, like, a normal person's body. But our brain just can't handle The Rock's face on a normal person's body. The technology they use is great, though, because it never looks like wonky to me or anything.
No.
And there's surprisingly a pretty good action scene of him escaping the chamber they have him in, and there's like an extended scene of him fighting in that skinny body, all those guards to make his way out of there. It goes on for quite a while. There's all the water pouring everywhere. It looks great. It's a pretty cool little scene.
Yeah, I was actually really surprised by this. I think it helps that in that sequence where he's escaping, he has like a breather mask over most of his face. And then in the flashbacks, they're kind of through filters, and he's like covered in dirt and stuff. But it still looks really good. Like obviously they're using some practical things to make their jobs easier. But like you said, I didn't feel ever taken out of it. And I will say that in Captain America, which to be fair came out 12 years ago, it definitely is a little jarring at times when they're kind of like when you see skinny Chris Evans, because they're clearly putting that face on somebody else. But with this, I don't know quite who had to be the Rock's body double or how they went about doing it, but the way they seamed it all together is really well done. And at no point does it feel like I ever get taken out or like I look at it and I'm like, wow, like when I was watching the flashbacks where you see his face on the body and everything, it doesn't feel like they pasted his face on somebody skinnier. So props to that. It looked great.
Hey, fun movie.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, they finally made a Black Adam movie. I have finally seen the Black Adam movie. This month is off to a fun start. We got a lot of cool stuff ahead. Next week, Andrew, I don't know if you heard this. Superman is returning. Superman Returns next week. Superman Returns is the movie that we kind of always had on our list from like the time we started this podcast. I think it qualifies, but for some reasons that are probably obvious when you look at the creative team, we kind of blacklisted it during our initial run. But we're just gonna jump in. We'll obviously not praise anybody that's not worthy of being praised. But there's plenty of other stuff to talk about in that movie. It's a very long movie. We got 2.5 hours to cover, I think, there. So we'll find some positives to jump into.
And it's just a very, like, just the space it exists in and what it was trying to do at the time was very interesting. It's we'll talk about it more on the episode, but it's like it's trying to be a legacy sequel with no returning cast members. It's a very strange beast. So
it's oddly like about that. Ahead of its time, but also stuck in the past, and like at the same time, it's very strange.
It's like it can't decide what it wants to kind of be sometimes. And I say hashtag PP, but plenty to talk about with it. Like you said, we'll disclaim at the beginning. There's certain things that aren't going to get brought up, but I think it's an interesting movie that is worth a discussion.
But hey, that's next week. For now, it's time for our question of the week. And if you want to ask a question for a future episode, you can just hop into our Discord server. There's a link in our show notes. If you haven't joined us already, hop on in there. It's a great community, great place to hang out and chat about all kinds of nerdy stuff. And there's a channel dedicated to leaving questions. And this week, our question comes from that guy in Doom who asks, what's a movie trope that always gets a chuckle out of you? Like in Monsters University, after the mom drops off the kid, she says, I'll just be in here listening to my tunes. And then she puts on Mastodon. Or the prim and proper poodle who blares System of a Down when the owners are gone. Which I think that's a gag from Secret Life of Pets, if I remember correctly. But I know exactly what they're talking about, this very specific trope. And that's a good example, because I do think that one always hits. Is it really Mastodon in a Disney movie? I vaguely remember that joke of the mom like listening to heavy metal, but I'm kind of surprised they actually got like licensed.
Was it Monsters University?
That's what the comment says. Yeah.
I'm curious now. I gotta see. Yeah, the song's "Island" by Mastodon.
Awesome.
That is fantastic.
Very
that
cool.
is fantastic. That is a fun trope. Like it happens in various forms. The idea of the unassuming person who kind of listens to like the heaviest music possible. It's always funny. I guess another one would kind of be that trope of like the unassuming person who ends up being like a total badass. like the person who's like looks like the most unassuming person possible, and then like beats up 6 dudes at once. That one's always pretty funny.
How about the foul-mouthed old person or old lady? Like Betty White was the master of this, right? The most sweet, unassuming person, but then they'll drop an F-bomb.
Yeah, it's always
That's a good one.
It's always fun. Yeah, it's always a good one. Trying to think what else there would be. The unassuming person doing spectacular things is a pretty straight. Like, the person, they get in the car and suddenly the person's like an expert driver that can evade the cops, things like that. Trying to think, or like the reverse, the super tough person who's into like the gentlest things possible. Like you've got the guy that looks like he's gonna destroy you, and then it cuts to him like gardening in his flowers or something. Like it's just that.
There's it's from. I'm trying to think if it's Snatch or Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. One of those movies. Man, I can't remember which one. I think Snatch. Vinnie Jones' character, like throughout the movie, the Madonna song keeps coming on. That "You must be my lucky star" thing is how it goes. Yeah. And at one point, his character's in the car, and it comes on the radio, and he goes, "Ooh, I love this track," and that is always stuck in my head because. Calling the song a track, I don't know, maybe that's like a UK thing, but it sounds weird to me. But again, it's just that trope of Vinnie Jones, who in those movies is like the toughest dude alive. Yeah. Loving that Madonna song. It's pretty good.
Yeah, the one I think of too is in the original Harold and Kumar. They kind of steal the car of the extreme douches that are kind of tormenting them the whole movie. And they've got like a tape that's like Chad's Extreme Mix Volume 5. And they put it in, and it's like Total Eclipse of the Heart, Amy Grant, like Wilson Phillips, stuff like that. Like just all like these prominent like female pop jams. And stuff like that's always going to get a chuckle out of me.
It's pretty good. Yeah. In the Discord, Jesse Anderson comments, and I think they're just running with the whole trope thing. Someone receives a phone call, and they always say verbatim, "I have to take this." Which, again, it's not really a joke, but that is very true. There's a lot of shorthands in movies that people don't actually say in real life. Right. We're not so different, you and I. I mean, how many times have you heard that in a movie? That's not like, I guess I've never been like a supervillain meeting a superhero, but I feel like it's so common in movies that it just works into the dialogue.
I'm going to say that to you every time that's going to be like my parting line to you, Chris, every time I see you now. You're going to be like, "All right, man, we'll see you next time you're in town." I'm like, "Yeah, we're not so different, you and I." And just walk away.
I'm going to make this normal.
We're going to normalize it. We're going to make it a thing. No, that's one too, where like, I always thought it was funny that like in Power Rangers, where the communicator watches would beep and they'd just like step off to the side and like, not at all hide themselves, but just the notion that the communicators went off and then all 5 of them leave the room every time. And I'm just like, how did nobody catch on to this? Like,
and then 5 beams of light shoot across the sky.
This is so weird. What a weird set of coincidences. Whoa.
That one caught you off guard.
It did. Or just, the classic hacker, I'm in. Like, just they open a computer and tap on the screen. Tap on the keys for 6 seconds, and then suddenly, I'm in. And it's like, that's not how that works. That's not how any of this works.
Enhance.
I always will love Super Troopers for like ending that joke forever.
Yes.
Unfortunately, people still do it, but that joke will forever be my favorite. Just print the damn thing. There's so many, but that's one I think for me is like when people don't talk like they do in real life in movies. Like, I love Christopher Nolan movies, but they're really guilty of that. Where just like the dialogue never feels like natural dialogue between people. It's
all
like
prepared speeches, like all monologues.
Even when it's a dialogue, it still feels like both people like came prepared, like they knew like they send each line of the conversation back and forth, perfectly crafting the next line. Even Oppenheimer, which I just saw, does fall into that a little bit, but yeah, just that'll always get me. I'm just like, people don't talk this way. Like, you'll rue the day. What? Who? I'll rue what day? What does that even mean? I mean, we joked about it earlier with like the X-Men line, but I'll always love a good subversion punchline where like they set it up for a clear answer and then they give like the most nonsensical answer instead. Like you think of something like Batman the movie, it's like, you know, when the answer to the riddle is like a sparrow with a machine gun, it's like, what?
Yeah.
How do you
Yeah.
Where does that come from? Like, how is that the clear answer? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, subverting expectations is kind of like a building block of comedy, but whenever you do it like just bare bones like that, I mean, it's good.
It's pretty funny. That's not to say you should always subvert expectations. It's not always a go-to, folks. I'm talking to you, J.J. Abrams.
You know, tropes are tropes for a reason, and sometimes they can maybe get tired or, you know, they can be problematic or what have you. But for the most part, I mean, it's just, like I said earlier, it's kind of shorthand. Like, you've got to get this idea across. If you can do it in one line, great. Or with the case of, you know, these jokes, you know, what trope gets a chuckle out of you? It's just a shorthand. Some things are always going to be funny. Like a mom listening to Mastodon is always funny. But what about you? Is there any other tropes you see reoccur that are just always gonna make you laugh? We want to hear about them. Let us know. Hop into that Discord and keep the conversation going. And until next week, Superman returns. Just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. How do you pronounce this director's name?
Jamais Collet Serra. He's Spanish.
Jamais?
Jamais.
That sounds French.
Or maybe it's... How do you say this? I don't know. I'm looking at the pronunciation on... Let's see if there's an interview with him somewhere.
I Googled it, how to pronounce, and there's a bunch of samples, but I can't hear it while I'm recording.
Jamais Collet Serra.
Jamais. All right, good job. Good job, man.
You just made it in sentence.